Hello. In this video, I invited Tudor Stanciu, tech lawyer, to discuss about GDPR compliance in email marketing. We will discuss about how to collect emails, how to send emails, and how to unsubscribe people. All this while being GDPR compliant. Thank you for joining me, Tudor.
Thanks a lot, Theo, for the invite. It's nice to be here.
Okay, let's start with cold emails. So we have two kinds of emailing: cold email and warm emails. Cold emails usually are emails that are sent to people who are not who didn't opt in for our communications. Uh, what do you think about this practice? How do you see it as being the GDPR compliant or not?
So I think there are two separate things I'd mention here. One is it really depends on the kind of email you're sending. So for instance, if you're doing mass marketing, you're running a newsletter campaign, almost often you're going to do a commercial communication, right? So that in most cases requires you to have a consent from the user to whom you're sending it. So that leads us to the conclusion that cold emailing done on a mass scale wouldn't necessarily be GDPR compliant. If we're talking specifically about the individual emails that you might be sending to, let's say, people you've interacted with in, let's say, offline settings at an event or something like that, which that might also be between a cold and a warm email. I think on that front, um, uh, since it's not, and most likely you wouldn't be sending from the get-go a commercial communication with your offer, with your discounts, and then doing a lot of follow-up emails. Basically, in that scenario where you do individual emails, you might argue that it's on the basis of a pre-existing relationship with that specific person or individual, and it might not necessarily be considered as spam. So I think it's this line between commercial communication and very personalized communication that follows on the footsteps of an initial interaction you've had with the person to whom you're sending the email. But in general, commercial communication done to emails of people who are not your customers wouldn't be GDPR compliant. And based on that, I mean, there are also maybe other differences. For instance, I just want to point out that relying on the privacy policy or the processing requirements of your email provider or of your newsletter provider doesn't necessarily make sense because you're the one who's sending the emails. You're just using a tool, whether it's MailChimp or MailerLite or whether it's Gmail altogether. It's you who's the one who's sending the emails, and you're the one who's responsible for that processing.
Yes, of course. Okay, how
Yeah.
about the way you obtain the database? Usually in cold emails, you can scrap emails from social networks.
Mm-hmm.
You can just buy a list, which is
Mm-hmm.
not well in cold email. This is the how people are doing it.
Yeah.
Does it matter? I mean, if you just broke the, let's say, the law by
Mm-hmm.
sending that unrequested email communication, does it matter how you get the database?
So I think again there are two things I'll mention here. So one is the fact that you've obtained the data without having uh, that data owner's consent um, makes it irrelevant whether you've collected it by buying a database,
Yeah,
by
of course.
scraping LinkedIn, by scraping different social media profiles. The second thing I would focus on is if you're building a business, that at its basis has a very strong footing in what email marketing means, meaning that you rely heavily on your subscribers. And let's say you run an online news outlet and you have a paid subscription. But you start off adding in your database emails from people which haven't consented to receiving different kinds of communications from you. That poses a problem if you plan on, let's say, exiting that business at a given stage. Because, let's say, in a due diligence process, there's clearly going to be a discussion about how those subscribers got in your database in the first place. And for some businesses which rely heavily on conversions done from the emails they send to their subscribers, I think basically your entire business and the business value might crumble. So I would say, and I think there's a third aspect to consider there. Whenever you're scraping different websites and different profiles of people on different websites, you might also be infringing on that website's or that platform's terms of service, which probably prohibits scraping of any kind of information.
But still, maybe they, for example, I didn't read the terms and conditions of Facebook or LinkedIn, but I suppose that if you get connected with somebody, in a way you agree to share your data with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have in their contact information an email. So.
Yeah, I think the email, I don't have up-to-date information on the terms of service of LinkedIn, probably, or any kind of other social platform. But I think LinkedIn and any kind of social media platform is just a provider of a tool. The way in which you use the information is totally the responsibility of each of the users. And probably the social media platforms don't make any kind of implication or are not involved in that process because it doesn't make sense for their business case. And the fact that you have different kind of emails or contact data visible on your profile doesn't automatically mean you're open to receiving any kind of emails. So it really depends. I mean, ultimately, each user is still the owner of the data, and technically, if we're again in the space of email marketing, so commercial communications, you wouldn't be necessarily able to send any kind of offers to that email address without that person's consent. If you want to chat with them, again, I would say, and I would say it's possible to do it via the social platform in the first place.
It's more gentle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, how about those emails that are generic? People say that I can send cold emailing to addresses like office, contact, support, admin. How about this? Are these addresses that that do not contain a name of a person do require GDPR consent in order to send them emails?
So I think there's a distinction here that we first need to make. You have the requirements of the GDPR, which apply to personal data, which to simplify means any kind of data that can be linked to an individual. And in that sense, generic email addresses such as office@nameofthecompany.com wouldn't most likely be personal data because you can't connect that piece of data with a specific individual in that company.
Depends if it's a solopreneur and he has support at.
I think that's a valid point. You have on a scale you probably are closer to being able to identify the person behind that website and that email address. Sorry, but again, there are a lot of solopreneurs that are solopreneurs just in branding. Could have a team
and they have a team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
So it
most
really,
successful ones.
yeah, it really kind of depends on that scale as well. You as an operator of that data are the one in charge. As a controller of the data, you are the one in charge of making a case for yourself if that is personal data or not. When
Mhm.
you have this impression that it might be personal data, it's probably personal data.
Okay.
And so that's the first part. The second part, so under the GDPR, those kinds of email addresses might, in a lot of cases, not be personal data.
Yeah.
So they don't fall under all of the requirements of the GDPR. However, obtaining consent in order to send commercial communications or in order to not do any kind of spam is a separate story because it's regulated in another piece of legislation. So consent for receiving commercial communications, offers, promotions, discounts, anything related to your company that might be akin to commercial communication is requires consent, regardless of what kind of email address is. Because again, behind the email address is someone who subscribes to that or who receives that commercial communication. So the consent for commercial communication is necessary regardless of the type of email address. Even if you don't, even if you're not responsible to fall under the GDPR and the requirements over there in terms of how you process that data, but consent is necessary.
And if you don't have this consent and still send messages, what can happen? It may be the receiver can sue you, or how?
It usually, I mean, a lot of the cases in which commercial communication or spam gets fined or gets under the crosshairs of a regulator is usually as a result of a complaint
Okay.
from a subscriber. Um, in practice, again, this is not legal advice, but in
Yeah.
practice, I think if you uh, if at least you have some sort of quality over the types of email addresses you have in your database, if you've curated it to some extent, if basically you do commercial communication, but not on mass scale, not on databases you've bought, but with people you know and that know you, in practice, you lower your risk of getting a
Complaints.
complaint. And
Okay.
also, if you give out a simple way for people to unsubscribe, and that unsubscribe button actually works, because, for instance,
Yeah.
I get a lot of email from service providers for law firms or conferences, and I've tried to
Answers.
unsubscribe from a lot of them, but unfortunately, I have a couple who keep sending me emails because they're
Uh,
automated emails and nobody curates what happens
Depends. This
behind the
can be
scenes.
intended, or maybe it can be a bug in the software that's sending.
Yeah, makes sense, makes sense. But when the reply address is
Okay.
actually one, yeah, it's not a no reply address. I
Uh,
expect it to be a little bit more curated.
yeah.
So I think, again, not legal advice because it doesn't mean that someone won't make a complaint against you, even if you're sending emails to a very curated list of potential clients. But probably the risk lowers if you're actually providing meaningful information to those people
Okay.
in your email list. But that again, I think we're going in a direction where in order to create that curated list, it probably you would reach out to a lot of individuals, maybe former
Yeah. It takes
clients or
time.
potential clients, and it you would probably get their consent to send that email. So the curation on a bot database, I don't think it actually happens in practice. You probably build your database from the get-go with people who are
Yeah.
actually interested.
Well, it takes time to receive. I mean, usually people are ignoring you when you are just sending a DM asking to some of them will refuse, so there will be just a small part that will agree. But
Mhm,
you will have a more qualitative list. This is the good
mhm,
part.
mhm,
There is a popular, let's say, thing that some people say, or I also received some emails, not too many, but people asking the consent to send me some other emails. But
mhm.
I see this also like this is also it's a consent. Okay, asking me for a consent. I didn't opt in for this
Yeah.
consent requirement. So it's kind of a cold email, but uh,
Mhm.
people are trying to look like they are correct. Look, we are asking for consent, but you already bother me. So
Yeah.
just maybe it's better to say what you want.
Yeah.
How about this consent? Is this consent requirement or asking for consent is GDPR compliant, or
So
is it?
yeah,
How do you
I
see
would
it?
say in principle it's not, because ultimately you're sending an email.
It's already an email. I mean,
Yeah, it's a commercial communication, and it's a communication for marketing purposes. Um, there are also two flavors that I think are worth mentioning here. Um, one is that it also depends on how you got the customer details in the first place, the customer email address.
okay.
Let's say if they're former customers, and you're sending them offers or a news that you've launched a new product, which is similar to what they've bought from you previously, similar or auxiliary, or are in some way connected to what they bought from you in the past. Um, this is called a soft opt-in.
Hmm.
So basically, you have a previous relationship, and there are the legal requirements in place allow you to send something related to, again, similar products, which means if you're running an e-commerce website for mattresses, let's say, and then you're starting a new e-commerce website for pet supplies, they're not similar products. I wouldn't be using the same database of
Yes.
emails.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah, yeah. But if they're similar, if you have a SaaS product and you're launching some new functionality, some new plugins that require additional payments being made by the customer, um, or something at least in the same sphere, you have an email marketing tool and I don't know, you're allowing them to also create some newsletters. Maybe those are similar. You could argue that you can send them some information about those new products and some discounts. And the second thing I'd mention is um, if I mean, there might be an angle where um, your commercial communications are the exact product um, that you're planning to sell them. And again, it might be a corner case, but let's say you're selling online courses, um, and now you're also running a newsletter, which is a paid newsletter, where you're sharing your tips and tricks on how to build similar successful courses to the ones you're already selling, because you're a successful course creator and
Yeah.
people are asking you how you're doing it, and you say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to run a newsletter, but it's going to be paid, and I'm going to share some information about that. And when you're sending the information about the newsletter that you're launching, which is paid, you could say, okay, I'm sending you an initial information about the type of content that I'm going to be publishing, a new type of product. They're not that similar, but I need to inform you that it's going to be a newsletter. And if you're willing to subscribe to that newsletter via my initial email, it would be okay. But again, I think also this example follows in the basket of similar products, because even in my example, there were kind of similar related to the type of business I'm already running. But to go back to your question, that it wouldn't be advisable to send an initial email asking for consent in most cases.
Thank you. Well, this was the part of cold emailing, because I see email marketing as two big types of communications: cold emails and warm emails. Warm emails are the emails that you are sent to people who opted in, or maybe people you know, or they know about your business. So maybe you met them at an event and they didn't opted in, but they know you. So it's like a warm relationship. They may then like your content or just spam report it, but they are not cold. I mean, cold is when somebody doesn't know that you exist until the moment they receive your first email. So let's continue our discussion about GDPR compliance in the warm email area. First thing first, I always wondered if I wondered how can I prove to somebody that it has subscribed to my newsletter? People forget about subscribing, or some of them they are just nervous in a day or another, so they maybe make file a complaint or something, and you get an GDPR audit by the GDPR authority. How can you show, look, this person subscribed to this newsletter? Is not, we didn't add it manually. Our programmers didn't add it to our database manually, because this can be done also. So what should we show, or how can we demonstrate this?
So one principle I would start from is to not over-engineer it, meaning not trying to collect more data only for the purpose of showing that we're trying to show that you're compliant. Yeah. So, for instance, if you're only collecting email addresses, what is the minimum additional type of data that you need to collect in order to prove that that email address was subscribed to your newsletter, let's say? And I think it could be a data log, and it should also be a snippet, not necessarily related to that user, but having at least intervals of time where you're showing this user subscribed to this text box, which looked like this. This was the version of the site or of the landing page that was active at the moment when I did this. And again, you don't need to do it user by user. I think you can say between this and this.
You can.
Yeah, this is how the checkbox looked, and this is where it was on my website.
Yeah.
And the third thing I would collect would be the checkbox and the text that was attached to the checkbox when they gave their consent to receiving your newsletter.
Okay,
because
so
the text is also important. For instance, I wouldn't collect IP address.
Okay.
Because that's an additional data processing, which isn't necessarily required for.
And it's personal.
Yeah, and it isn't necessarily required to for the purpose for which you're processing it. In my view, you're just over processing data, which is not necessarily.
Okay. Because you can look from this IP you subscribe, So,
yeah,
if
but
it's too
I
much,
don't think
it can be too much.
I mean, in the eyes of the authority, from my point of view, can't argue, oh, this IP address is not connected to this email address. Yeah.
This IP address is not from
exactly
somewhere.
Yeah. They just want I tend to think they just want to know that the consent was obtained and it was validly obtained, and that's why also the text of the checkbox is relevant.
Okay, let's say we gathered some emails. Does it matter? I mean, it's clear that in real life they don't care people with what kind of email service provider are sending our emails. But from, let's say, the legal point of view, should we say in privacy policy or somewhere that
Mhm,
the newsletter emails or all the emails are going to deliver by MailChimp or Messenger
mhm,
OS? Send?
mhm,
Should we uh, put this somewhere in privacy policy? And the second question related to this, if we change this provider
mhm,
because of, let's say, technical reasons, should we ask or tell people this small detail
mhm.
about where is their email stored? I see that it's small, maybe it's not small,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So there's been some sort of an evolution in let's say in recent times. You technically are okay if you're nominating in your if you're mentioning in your privacy policy the types of processors. So let's put it simply, the
types,
types of
not
software
names.
providers you're using. So the
Okay.
types you're using, email marketing tools, you're using hosting providers, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But there's also been a recent development. I think last year there was a European Union Court of Justice judgment that was handed down, saying that in some cases, and I can look for it specifically. In some cases, you'd be better off actually nominating in your privacy policy the types of the not the types, but the actual processors that
Platform.
you're using,
Okay.
the names of the companies. And if we were to go down that path, uh, it follows that when you're doing an update of your tools, you're also doing an update of the privacy policy. And since the privacy policy is also a type of legal document, and also under the GDPR, you have to disclose the types of entities you're working with and who is actually obtains access to the data that the user has given. Um, I would say you would have to do an information of your users when you're doing changes to the privacy policy.
Okay.
So ideally, what I would do in practice is to try to bundle changes to the privacy policy and notify them um, as a bundle. So not making notices every time you do a
Yeah,
change to
yeah.
the privacy policy. Probably the changes in, let's say, from MailChimp to Messenger OS is going to come as part of a larger technical update to the platform.
Yeah.
So I would notify the users of the changes in privacy policy for all the changes at once, every 6 months, every yearly, depending on how often you do the technical changes.
Thank you. I want to continue with the journey of the subscriber or typical, let's say, e-commerce platform store or maybe a SaaS platform, doesn't matter. So there are a few type of basic subscriptions flows. One of them is popular, but it's a bit annoying for the visitors. It's a pop-up that opens in your face after a few seconds, and
Mhm.
the website invites you to subscribe to newsletter, and you will receive to their newsletter. Doesn't say what it will contain, or maybe it says it's commercial information, but and you will receive 5% of discount for your first order or something like that. Do you see any problem here?
I think in this scenario, the consent might not be explicit because, for instance, you mentioned that in a lot of cases you don't know exactly what you're going to receive via the newsletter.
Yeah,
Um, Another thing is that the consent is not freely given. I would argue that because it's bundled with um, the
it's a
possibility,
transaction.
yeah, the possibility of getting that discount, and you don't know exactly if that user is signing up to actually receive marketing communications or they're signing up to get
For
the
the
discount.
discount.
Yeah. There are some opinions that say you could be on the safe side if the discount is not withdrawn, if that person unsubscribes from the newsletter. But again, I think the problem is you're not aware of the implications of the consent you're giving, what actually happens with personal data. Because again, if there's no privacy policy attached, there would be a problem regarding what kind of processing occurs with that personal data. One thing I'm thinking you could do is asking for consent on newsletters with special offers from the company, discounts and stuff like that. But without, not giving the discount and asking them to be subscribed to a newsletter with all sorts of commercial offerings, but having a pop-up and saying, okay, sign up here and you're gonna get all sorts of offers, discounts and stuff like that from the company. If they opt in for that, the first email you send them is something with a discount.
Okay, so for 10% discount, it's sign up for our commercial offers.
Yeah, commercial offers, promotion, discounts, and
what if I say at the end, and you will get 10% discount?
I wouldn't. It's not freely given. You don't know if they signed up.
Okay, it's not the intent. It's for the discount and it's not for the offers, right?
Exactly.
This is what.
But I don't think. Again, it would need to be analyzed a bit more. But I'm thinking, if they agree to receive in general all sorts of commercial promotions, and they sign up, and the first email they get from you with the confirmation also includes a discount, I think that would be a better option. It needs to be analyzed, but something.
Yeah, but the people probably use the discount to incentivize people. Okay, get 10% and give me your email.
Yeah, I know, but it's as you mentioned, it's transactional. It's not really.
Probably they will unsubscribe after the first order, and that's it. But I was curious about the legal part. Somebody can make a complaint because.
Again, making a complaint is something that is possible. It's also possible to have a complaint even if you're 90%, 100% compliant with all of the requirements of the law. The problem is whenever you're getting a complaint for this kind of non-compliance, an authority is going to look at your entire database.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the problem.
Not just isolated case.
Exactly.
They will make a real control, let's say.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Okay. How about, the most simple, maybe the most correct way would be to add a checkbox when you create an account. And everywhere where you give your email, you can add a marketing checkbox saying, I agree to receive emails. But, right, this is correct, but I don't know how efficient it is.
Well, I've seen cases where if your checkbox text, the text attached to the consent checkbox is both explicit and at the same time maybe it's a little bit more written in more human language. And it's not
a copy. A copy should.
A copy, right? Yeah, exactly. And maybe you try to do it more in line with the way you're usually communicating on your website, make it more friendly. I think conversion rates increase. Also keeping in mind that it's a separate checkbox, that it's not pre-checked.
Yes.
Yeah. So those things
are
not important.
Forced to check it. It's optional.
Yeah. And the text also needs to be very explicit. There are practices where people say in the checkbox that you as a customer, if you check this, you don't agree to receiving marketing emails. So it's a practice. I mean, they're basically asking for consent whether you don't
Negative.
approve. Yeah,
It's
you
like a
don't.
negative
It's like a negative.
way.
And I mean, it's complicated in a lot of cases to argue that that's not ambiguous because it's. I mean, your mind doesn't work like this.
Yeah.
So try to write it in as plain as simple words as possible. Maybe use even ChatGPT to try ask you to give him a good prompt about your customers and their profile and ask him to do a better version of your initial text. And take into account these steps. Consent needs to be freely given, explicit, unambiguous, and informed. So you need to be, it doesn't need to be bundled with another thing. It needs to be clear. It needs to be written in very simple terms, and you need to be aware for what you're giving your consent.
Okay. Regarding the lead magnets and special created landing pages to collect email. So if I have a lead magnet for a checklist, whatever it is, a PDF, and I'm asking the email of the person, and of course, my objective is to add it to an email list and then continue with some other information, which can be related to the checklist, to the lead magnet. But it's not necessarily about that specific lead magnet. Should I get a separate consent to send other kind of content or emails with other kind of content, but let's say in the same area, maybe in the same domain?
So I think if it's in the same area or same domain, since the initial reason for which you're giving out the email is to receive the service, whether it's you're signing up to a landing page to be notified when the product is going to be launched, or you're giving your email address because that's the only way in which you can receive a report, a PDF, a checklist, whatever it is. That initial reason is related to your ability to become part of the agreement in the terms established by the website owner. Because the website owner has said, okay, if you want this PDF, I need to give it to you via email because I didn't want to upload it on my website.
It can be a technical reason.
Yeah. Or you're signing up to learn when we're going to be public with our new product because you want to be a client of it, and that's the only way you're going to find that. If you're using that initial detail and that initial context to then leverage it and send additional information related to the product, as long as you keep an unsubscribe button, I think it's okay. But if you're using it to create, I don't know, a database which you're using for email marketing, which is, I don't know, let's say you're using it to build a newsletter with all sorts of news and information about the industry and stuff like that, I would say that's a separate consent that needs to be given. So it's
another context.
Yeah,
so
it's
you
another
should
context.
Keep the context of the lead magnet.
Yeah. I mean, again, if I'm sending a report which you're receiving via email, and then I'm going to do some additional reports in the near future, or checklists or stuff like that, I can probably argue, again, that would be need to be analyzed, but I can probably argue I can send you the additional reports without asking you to go again through the process because it's a similar product. And if I do a totally separate thing, you need to have an.
We are in the subscription life of a subscriber. Okay, we subscribe, we're receiving all kinds of offers, and of course, maybe we just want to opt out at some reason. There are some, depending on the email service providers, you can just click and you see a message saying you opt out from everything by go to our website, or you can go and see, as Messenger has its form where you can leave some feedback, maybe choose to register to some other newsletter flows, and of course you can choose to opt out from everything. How do you see these two kind of flows for unsubscribe in order to be compliant?
So first of all, unsubscribing shouldn't be more complicated than giving the initial consent was, which follows that it also can be easier. But it doesn't have to be more complicated. That's a requirement.
Okay.
Depending on the medium that you're using, for instance, if you have usually when you're sending marketing emails, you're doing it by a tool, and that tool allows you to configure your campaign with an unsubscribe button, which then automatically leads to a website where you're able to you either receive the confirmation that you've been unsubscribed, or you do another opt-in to confirm that you're unsubscribing. I would say even the second option is okay, as long as it's really clear and you don't go on a page which has a lot of options and you need to change a lot of things. If you're sending multiple newsletters, I think configuring your preferences and going to a page where you can opt in or opt out of the different newsletters that you're sending, again, might be okay to the extent that the language is really clear for each of the newsletters and the user can identify very simply which newsletter he or she is opting in or out.
Some platforms have separate links in a footer. One says unsubscribe, because it's important that you really unsubscribe that person, because if it's another step that it doesn't take, let's say if you are on a form page and doesn't choose to unsubscribe from there because it forgets or whatever, he will receive in the newsletter. And probably he will get mad and just hit the spam complaint button. And there is another link saying edit preferences, and there you can see all the campaigns if you have more than one, and choose to what to subscribe from that point on.
Yeah, if we were to go a step even further, I would say, to the extent your marketing tool allows it, try to, for each campaign, only have the unsubscribe button, because it's the easiest way to do it. The edit preferences, for my taste, would be something that the user does proactively and not reactively, where they go to your website and maybe they can log in into an account or check their email marketing preferences whenever they want to do this proactively, rather than when they want to unsubscribe from a specific newsletter, they only have the option to unsubscribe from that newsletter, and they're doing it reactively.
Yes, correct. It would be a more firm intent. Okay. How about open clicks? Open clicks gives to email marketing platforms information about IP, web browser, time of opening an email or clicking on it. So this is kind of personal data in a way, because all this can relate to the email. Should this data be somewhere in the privacy policy contained?
Long story short, yeah, I mean, any kind of
and you consider this private data, right?
Yeah,
because it's about the activity of the user.
Because it's probably in your database, you're probably connecting it to a specific user that made that action. If it's aggregated data, I mean, you don't connect it with the email address and other types of details you have over a specific user, I don't think it's personal data. But if you store it, I mean, if you have two separate databases, because any kind of data that can lead to the identification of a person, whether individually or by connecting it with other data that you have over that individual, is personal data. If you have aggregated data over clicks and stuff like that, which cannot be nominally attributed to either of your users, then it's not personal data. But from my experience,
Yeah.
my limited experience with marketing tools, with email newsletters, they tend to show you exactly who person clicks on
Yes. Data
different.
is the new oil. So if you get
Yeah,
the data, you
yeah,
should leverage the most of it.
yeah.
Of course, uh, we don't care about each person, right? But
Hmm.
it's related to each email. You can, after a time, after a while, when there is too much volume of data, you can aggregate some stuff. But
Hmm.
still, for a certain period back in time, you store this data about the user,
Yeah,
about an email.
yeah. At the same time, if you're only seeing throughout your email on the different links, let's say you have inserted in the email, how many of your people, of your users clicked, sorry, on the link, that's aggregated data. I mean,
Yes,
you
yes,
see
I know.
15%, that's not personal data per se.
Yes, correct. That's agree.
Mhm.
But sometimes maybe someone complains that he didn't receive an email or something. It's good to see that he opened the email still. So at least for a period, because of course, if you have high volume of data, it costs to so the storage starts to cost.
Mhm.
So uh, after I don't know period amount of time, you start just aggregating it and just remove the data. But until then, you have
Mhm.
this data.
Yep.
Okay. How about when we end the subscription? There is a problem that I see. So, you know, medium to large or even small companies, people have lists of emails, even if they are opted in. I mean, if they are okay, GDPR compliant lists.
Mhm.
But some of them keep them in it. Usually, you keep them in your email service providers, but sometimes you just take them out, maybe make an export, or because you want to use them somewhere else, whatever. And you may have more than one source of data. Let's say one email can be in three lists just because there are three employees or whatever. So somebody comes and unsubscribes, right? I see the danger would be that some colleague comes and imports again the list
Mhm.
without knowing that person unsubscribed
Mhm.
and subscribe again and
Mhm.
just send again the newsletter. So that will be okay. Probably it's also not a GDPR compliance way to keep the data
Mhm.
in Excel
Mhm.
files, but at the human level, you
Mhm.
will receive the same newsletter again after you opted out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you think we should anonymize the data after people unsubscribe, or remove, or anonymize because it's different?
You make it anonymous. If you plan on doing additional stuff with it after
Mhm.
um, people have decided they want to ask you to erase it. And even if you plan on doing this, you should be very explicit in your privacy policy from the moment you ask your users to sign up to your let's say newsletter. That once they've erased it, you're planning on once they've asked you for you to erase it, you plan on making it anonymous for further processing, because I'm assuming that's the reason
Yeah,
you want to
you
do
make
that.
aggregates, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I would also then focus on what making it anonymous means. Mm, Data which becomes anonymous must be data which cannot be reverted. That's what
Okay.
anonymity
Yeah.
means. Cannot
Yeah.
be reverted to be retraced to an individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It can be anonymous for one of your departments in your company and personal data for another one, to the extent that the first department can't communicate or doesn't have access to the decryptor data that allows it to understand whose data belongs to whom, because that would mean it's not actually anonymous. And I would say, taking all of this into account, I would say that if you don't have specified in your privacy policy this purpose of further processing after you've made the data anonymous. When a user requests you to erase their data or withdraws their consent for email marketing, you should actually erase it. You can then say, okay, I've made it anonymous
Change your name.
because it wasn't the purpose that you've specified for data processing in
Yeah.
your privacy policy, and you weren't transparent with the type of processing
But
you're
if you
doing.
just receiving a request to forget, there was a way of saying forget about me, forget about user. In a way, this is anonymous. But if somebody just unsubscribes,
Mhm.
doesn't mean forget about me. It just says, right, don't send me emails anymore.
I mean, it depends if you're also using the data, if you have any kind of other relationship to the user. If
Okay.
if you only
If it
have a
has an
user,
account,
let's say you have users that have subscribed to your email newsletter, but they're not also users of your product.
yeah,
So that follows that those people are not going to have any kind of other relationship with your company
yes, correct.
if they, yeah, if they're also users of your product. That's fair. I mean, your point is really valid. They're still users of your product, but they're not. They don't
Okay.
want to receive your newsletter anymore. That's okay.
Okay, thank you. This is it regarding the commercial emails. Let's go a little bit into the transactional emails. These are the emails that are triggered by somebody's action. If you forget your password, if you create an order, do stuff like that. How do we need any consent for them?
Mhm.
I mean, these are like service emails.
Yeah, yeah. And as you mentioned, since they're service email, which is a good way of shaping them, they're required in order for you as a user to understand what is happening with your purchase, with your, let's say it's a physical
Yeah,
product, with your order, if what's the delivery process, and it also relates to how you've chosen to receive that product. So all of those things that are required in order for you to actually get access to the service or the product is transactional email, and it's processed under a different processing grounds under the GDPR, which is executing a contract. And it would be the same, for instance, for resetting your password to be able to access your online account. You're dealing with a company that has an online presence. In order for you to be able to access that company's services, you need to be able to access your account. So resetting a
right.
password again is transaction. It's service email. You wouldn't be able to receive the service without receiving the email, allowing you to do all sorts of changes to your.
How about somebody is a bit more creative and after sending all the required information, for example, the link for the resetting password, what should that email, transactional email contain? What if they add some offers over? How do you see it?
So I think it's quite similar to, let's say, having in your signature block in the
Yeah,
email all
yeah, yeah.
sorts of links
Oh, I know.
to other companies in your portfolio or
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. Um, I'd say it's borderline. First of all, you're better equipped to know this than me. I think it also depends on how versatile the tool is, how if it allows you to
Okay,
configure.
let's see it allows. You can add
Yeah,
something
yeah,
there, a banner or something.
yeah. I mean, I think um, if it's, let's say it's not, it's a catch-all banner. I mean, it has a general. You're
Yeah, maybe
running
you
a
announce an
campaign.
event.
Yeah, you're running a campaign, or you're planning an event or stuff like that,
Mhm.
and it's not directly connected to the action that they're making. Let's say they want to delete their account, let's say, and
Yeah.
you're saying, okay, if you don't delete your account, you're going to get 10% off your next purchase. I don't think that would be okay. But if your offer is standard, regardless of the type of it's not connected to the action that they're making, I would say, again, not legal advice. I think it's a gray area we need to analyze a little bit further, but you might find an angle where that makes sense. I mean, it's okay. It would be okay. It would be considered spam.
Okay.
But again, we need to analyze a little bit further, because I think, as you've seen throughout the discussion, the text, the wording actually matters a lot.
Yes. Well, I think it's important that, first of all, we should treat subscribers as humans and respect them. And this will bring us more, let's say, loyalty and business. And for those who think that they should just put emails in people's head, probably the law will, protect these people. The GDPR law protect these people in receiving those emails. Okay, one more thing. Let's say about the SMSs, which is more intrusive and difficult to unsubscribe method. How do you see it? How can we be compliant when we are sending SMSs, non-transactional, let's say just commercial?
Yeah. So again, we start with how the user got subscribed in the first place, and making sure that they can unsubscribe in a way that is not more difficult than subscribing. Let's say they subscribe by giving an SMS, they can unsubscribe by also giving an SMS. They don't have to call, they don't have to incur additional fees when they're unsubscribing, versus when they needed to do when they subscribe. I saw some. I honestly, I've only seen a few implementations done for, let's say, tech businesses or online businesses, where when you're signing up to receive all sorts of commercial communications, you also have a checkbox specifying SMS. Because
separate.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be separate than email.
Yeah, because I think it's a different medium. It's a different processing of data.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've only seen one recent implementation of that done. And I think if you sign up for that, you should be able to unsubscribe when you're receiving the SMS by replying at any moment, yes or no, or something like that. And probably each SMS should come with if you want to unsubscribe, reply Y or
N. The problem is the SMS is expensive, more expensive than the email, and it's very short. So it has only 140 characters in order to send one SMS. You can send 2 SMSs if you want, but it costs more.
Yeah.
So that's why it's difficult to create a personalized link. Just to click and unsubscribe like emails. In emails, each unsubscribe link is unique for your email.
Yeah.
So this is going to make them very long, right? So adding a long email inside an SMS, it's not very profitable. That's why probably people don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, taking into account the limitations that you have, I would say if it's possible to couple the text, the contents that you want to send, the commercial contents, with also a very short link where they can jump on to unsubscribe.
Create a unsubscribe page with a phone, and that can be a short URL, and just send people there and enter their phone, and that's it. And then continue sending.
And then continue sending, because the team member who was in charge of actually making sure that the data wasn't stored there, that didn't do their job. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, more serious note, you can make this page and just unsubscribe by your phone number, and normally
Yeah.
you should not receive. But
Again, I
this is
think
not similar with the
yeah.
way you subscribe, which was a checkbox.
Yeah, that's true. But the idea is to not make it more complicated. I think
Yeah.
if you have technical reasons, technical blockers, which again, you don't have to make it very cumbersome for you as an operator to unsubscribe and incur a lot of costs to actually do it.
Yeah.
It makes sense to try to do it to not make it more complicated. I would say clicking on a link is not more complicated than just replying yes or no. Probably it
Yeah.
might be also easier.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing, do you know some cases when there were some GDPR fines applied for email marketing?
So I took a look on trying to
Mm-hmm.
see um, some fines in the European Union for direct marketing in general. There are a lot of fines related to, especially in recent years, related to um, marketing done through social media, which is not based on specific on the right legal grounds. There's also some fines related to um, cold calling, which have been given especially to large telecom companies. And again, even in cold calling, the same principles apply. Um, you shouldn't be giving promotional calls without the
Yes.
proper consent of companies of the end users. Um, I managed to get my hands on um, one specific fine that was given, I think in 2022, by the Information Commissioner's Office, which is the data protection authority in the United Kingdom. So it's not European Union at the
Okay.
moment, but it's still the UK
Yes.
has implemented a lot of the principles in the GDPR in their Data Protection Act. And in the UK, the Royal Mail, so the postal office of the UK, um, had sent around 200,000 marketing emails to individuals for whom it did not have valid consent. Initially, it was thought it was a technical error, but the idea it was that it was a manual error, um, meaning that people who hadn't signed up to be users of the Royal Mail's website, if I'm not mistaken, which were only using their website as guests, um, um, were accidentally because they inserted their email address whenever they wanted to uh, be provided with a postal service by the
Yeah.
Royal Mail, even if they didn't have an account on their website. Those email addresses were accidentally put in the same database as the email addresses of people who had an account on the Royal Mail's website and had subscribed to receive email addresses. Um, the fine wasn't that big. It was something around I think 25,000 euros for that
Mm.
specific
Yeah.
case.
For the Royal
Um,
Mail. It was.
yeah, I mean for the dimension of the institution, it's not that big. Um, however, I think on a more general note, it seems that the scale of your email marketing activities is going to dictate how likely you are to receive a complaint, and also uh, the how repetitive you are with sending unsolicited email or emails for which people have unsubscribed, but you keep on sending them. Because if I make a comparison with the other type of, let's say, marketing channels for which companies have received um, complaints and then fines, for instance, there's a telecom company in Italy called Team, which received around 20 million euros in fines. but they contacted, they had millions of cold calls or something like that. And there were even individuals who had received over 150 calls in 1 month. So it's also about the scale of your processing activities and how, if people object to that, if you actually respect their wish in doing that. But I think it's also easy to forget if you're actually processing personal data with the right legal grounds when you start scaling, because a lot of companies don't go back and revisit, especially bootstrap companies, don't revisit their internal processes. Only later on they start scaling, they have a lot of users, and they forget to check, okay, are we actually validly processing this data? It makes sense to do it very, very informally when you have tens or hundreds of users or maybe thousands of users. Because once you start scaling, you should really check your legal grounds.
Yeah, true. Okay, that's all from my part. If you have maybe any questions or something else to add.
No, I'm really looking forward to see exactly how this space of email marketing becomes more, let's say, predictable for the end users. We have a lot of tools that can help us do email marketing. But even now, when we're approaching 6 years since the GDPR came into force, there are a lot of activities that are conducted, especially on the commercial marketing side, without having the right legal grounds in place. And of course, a lot of them don't continue because the businesses don't scale or can't create a valid business model around them. But for those who scale, I think it's really important to make sure that email addresses are validly collected, are validly processed, and what's important is to understand that if you plan to exit your business, the validity of the processing activities is something that is going to be scrutinized during due diligence. And probably, Theo, you know this better than me, that email opens and email marketing campaigns still have one of the highest open rates and are one of the most successful ways of interacting with your subscribers, which all the more makes sense that a lot of your success as a company might be attributed to the way you communicate with your users.
Yeah, and it's the highest ROI, the highest return of investment for commercial emails. Well, thank you very much. I hope this video will help entrepreneurs or everybody who's wants to be GDPR compliant in its company's activities. And I hope to see you soon on a discussion.
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.